running out, the adrenaline pumping as I attempt to plan for what might happen next, the most important decision I've ever had to make, my reputation on the line. Ever since I was young, my goal was always the same: to beat my dad. At board games, I've made so many memories playing the classics growing up. From my sister throwing her money at me during Monopoly, to huge arguments over Clue, and learning that I never wanted to have kids through the game of life. As I got older, the games we played rapidly expanded, and I learned that board games are so much more than what most people think they are. The beautifully crafted stories send you to entirely different worlds with the friends and the family that you play with. Today, we will first discuss how mechanics build a board game's foundation. Next, we will dive into how style affects the way a board game's story is told. And finally, how theme really draws players in. Using interesting mechanics helps tell stories as well as make an interesting game to play. One specific type is dungeon crawl games. According to The Snakecast, a podcast by the Dice Tower, dungeon crawls are games in which players take on the role of brave adventurers, exploring dungeons, seeking treasure, and battling monsters. While these games tend to have longer play times, the base of the game being a dungeon crawl allows for elaborate storytelling and detailed plot lines that really draw players in. Many dungeon crawls heavily highlight combat and fighting mechanics. Some may use dice rolls, while others will use decks of cards. Gloomhaven is a very popular dungeon crawl with hundreds of scenarios in which players choose a character and decide their own path. The main focus of Gloomhaven is its combat system, which uses a deck of cards that give bonuses as well as determine whether or not you actually hit your opponent. Gloomhaven is a very elaborate dungeon crawl, however, they can be more minimalistic, such as Dungeons and Dragons. All you need to play are some books and some dice. The mechanics of the game have a very wide set of rules, thus allowing players to completely make it their own. D&D was one of the very first dungeon crawls, thus having a lot of other games using the same rules and base mechanics for their own system. The game completely immerses the characters in the world and forces them to think and strategically plan in order to win and go on their own adventure. These are a great show of what board games can do and the incredibly crafted worlds that so many get to enjoy. Eurogames are a popular form of game among avid forms of gaming. Eurogames are German-style board games that tend to favor strategy-based styles of gameplay over luck-based mechanics. Luck-based mechanics are things that are seen heavily throughout popular mainstream board games. They rely on dice rolls and other things that can't be controlled. Games such as Yahtzee fall under this category. While Eurogames will use some of these luck-based rules, they tend to add variety to a game instead of a main core structure. Pandemic is one example of a Eurogame that uses luck-based mechanics in order to add complexity, but still requires strategic thinking and planning in order to win. Other popular Eurogames include Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride. According to the book Tabletop Analog Game Design, edited by Greg Kostickian and Drew Davidson, many Eurogames are played by families together, but reward the intellectual maturity that older players bring to bear and the evolution of deeper strategic thinking by younger players. These games surround players in a world in which they are forced to think carefully and plan in order to win. Eurogames provide a lighthearted competition and urge you to beat your opponent without becoming too aggressive. Board games have become increasingly popular due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Extended hours at home with the family have found many people turning to board games. Hasbro has seen a 21% increase in sales over the last year. During extended months at home, board games are a great distraction to keep kids out of trouble. The theme is one of the most essential parts to drawing in players. The possibilities are endless, from cute, whimsical games to dark, horror-based stories. Think about a game that you were really invested in. What made it so appealing, so immersive? The theme sets the foundation for the rest of the gameplay and draws players in. One such game is Pandemic. Board Game Geek describes Pandemic as a game in which players take on the role of disease-fighting specialists whose mission is to treat viral diseases spread out across the world, racing to find a vaccine. Published by Z-Man Games in 2008, no one would have ever thought that they could relate to an apocalyptic world racing to find a vaccine. However, as some of you may have noticed, the story behind Pandemic is strikingly familiar. If only reality were as simple as a 45-minute multiplayer board game. According to Storytelling in the Modern Board Game by Marco Arnato, interesting game situations may translate into important decisions in the game world, brilliant gameplay actions into unexpected plot twists, and generally the progress of my character is a nice reward for my good gameplay. The importance of a good basic idea and plot helps players connect with a game and grow invested in their gameplay. Games such as Catan have a very basic set theme, and while it doesn't necessarily tell a written story, it allows players to turn the map into their own civilization. Using minimalistic pieces in order to convey the idea of the game allows players to use their imagination and have creative freedom when building towns and roads in order to earn achievements and win the game. Board games are a very important part of my life and have been my main form of entertainment for years. Playing with my dad has always been tricky since I was little. He refuses to let me win, thus giving me an extensive losing streak growing up. However, as I got older and I developed strategic thinking skills, I slowly turned those losses into wins. Now, I currently have an approximately 30-game winning streak over the last 2 months. Playing Euro games has incredibly expanded my critical thinking skills, as well as provided a light-hearted competition between my father and I. The stories and the world that players get completely immersed in are a form of art that I truly enjoy. The endless possibilities of mechanics and style as well as theme provide an extensive selection from one which can choose. The world of board games is so much more than what it seems on the surface. A true art form ready to be explored.